Today we'll be talking about object-oriented programming. It's written in short as OOP, so you see that quite often highlighted. Some of the things we'll try to target our objectives today would be discussing about programming patterns. Now, this is different from design patterns. Design patterns is a whole different picture that we don't need to look at right now. But we'll talk about the programming patterns that we've seen so far and what we'll see going forward. We'll also look at the two key programming paradigms, right? The procedural versus object-oriented programming. We'll look at some basics of OOP. We'll look again at constructors, getters, and setters. That's part of the basics. And the principles, the principles of object-oriented programming. That actually goes a step beyond just the basics, but it's good to have these ideas out there. So when you see them in real life, you can approach them appropriately. So what are we going to look at in terms of big picture? We'll learn how to model problems by using this OOP concept, get to know the basics and some of the principles that guide us to be able to be successful in this. Now, that said, what we've been doing so far, we've looked at data types, right? Variables, how we can get all these data types and put them in data structures, like our collections, which in terms of collections, we're talking about dictionaries and sets. We've also seen how we can put those in lists or tuples or arrays. Those are sequences, okay? But at the end of the day, we looked at how we can work on our content sequentially, have multiple statements, one line at a time. That's the order in which the program executes. Then we feel that we can have conditional execution using if-else statements, or we could also have repetitions using while loops or for loops. And finally, we talked about how we can store parts of our program and we use it in different areas when we call that execution. So we do have to change our approach from that step-by-step approach into an object-oriented approach. Why do we need that? That's because what we've been doing so far, those are smaller programs, right, that do just a tiny little bit, just a feature or one simple thing. You can code that in 10, 5, 20, 50, 100 lines. But in the real world, when you get into an enterprise or big company industry, you'll be looking at code that is 1 million lines of code. There's been more than that in areas that I work. So in order for us to be able to easily modify and easily extend this with less code, we have to look at object-oriented programming. Why? Because it models real-world scenarios. We are able to have those large problems broken into smaller pieces, and then we can focus on those smaller pieces. Even in real world, when you have a big problem, you have to break it down into smaller pieces that are solvable. Once you solve all those pieces, you're able to solve the big picture or the big problem. But regardless, programs, the way we look at it, always need to get some kind of input to give us some kind of output. So that's what we're going to use to be able to model that. So let's talk about object-oriented programming itself. So right now in the world today, there are two main types of programming approaches. The procedural type, which is centered on procedures, steps, which are more or less functions. You have a function that does something. So you get an input, it gives you an output. That's what has been the driving force of procedural language or procedural programming. Object-oriented programming is centered around objects. So we have a problem we're trying to solve. How do we solve it? We need to take that problem and model it and see what actors we have, what different parts are in that project. So when you do that, you change your approach from the structural, which was first, how structures are set up, to procedural, which is how things were done in the 90s and 80s, to currently the object-oriented approach of object-oriented programming. So like I said, it focuses on objects and real-world scenarios. So for instance, we've been writing this code about rock, paper, scissors. What we are doing is we're trying to look at the input, the program, and then the output. But if we want to look at it in an object-oriented approach, we're going to look at actors. What are some of the actors? The player is the actor. The computer can also be an actor. If you're going to do that, we can decide to have 1 player, 2 players, 3, 5, 10 players. The same with a game of dice, right? So with object-oriented programming, the basic things we need to talk about are the class, okay? So with the class, you're looking at it as a data type. Remember from the onset, we said data has to have a type, string or integer or float and so on. This class is pretty much a type, which in terms of the real-world scenario, we're looking at it as a blueprint. For you to build a house, you have to come up with a blueprint. With that blueprint, you can use it to build one house. If you decide that you like it so much, you build another house. Each one of those houses are different, but they're using the same architecture, or should I say the same template, right? Now, every object in the real world will have attributes, which are known as properties as well. So for instance, this car you see right here has 4 doors. The car has a color. So the type of car, the number of doors, the color of the car, the make, the model, the year, all of those are things that the car has. So what you have is an attribute. What you have is a property, right? In the same light, the class also has a method. The method is pretty much the behavior, how that class is going to behave. For instance, a printer would be a class, right? When you create a printer, it becomes an object. But what does a printer do? It prints. So you can have a behavior or a method to say print, maybe print black and white or print color. If it's a multi-feature printer, maybe you can scan, maybe you can copy. All those will be things that it can do, what it does. So it's an action. The method or behavior is an action, while the attribute or property is a characteristic, something that it has. So finally, once you've had that template, you can use that template to produce an instance of that class. That instance of that class gives you an entity, for instance, an object. But in order for you to be able to create that object, you need a constructor. Constructor is going to help you put all those pieces together, and then you come out with an object. So a constructor would be like an assembly. For instance, if you have plastic, wood, metal, glass, those are all things that you need to put together based on a blueprint, which is a class. That class is going to be using an assembly factory or a constructor to be able to produce an object. So that's just one object. You can produce 10 classes. Okay. So again, as you requested a class and a type to explain that. When you start writing code, for instance, you say hello world. The world is of a certain type, a certain data type. That hello is a string. So that data type is a string, which technically is also a class. A string is a class. You can decide to have an instance of a string that's called hello. You can have another instance of a string that's called welcome. You can have another instance of a string that's called hi. All of those strings are created from the class str, that stir class. So in the same way, we also want to create our own built-in objects. When we said Python is object-oriented, it focuses on objects. That's because all our data types, those primitive data types, those data types that come with Python, integer, string, bool, float, those are all built into Python. In order for us to expand it to build our own type of stuff, we go ahead and create our own objects using a class. We build a class to be our blueprint, and then we can create as many objects as we have. Does that answer your question, Anne?
Yes. So can we say data types, they fall under class, right?
Exactly. So let me actually just jump in and show you real quickly. In an example, let's go to the very first class that we did on day one. So day one, we did a print hello Vitus, right? If we went ahead and checked for, we did not have any assignments in here. Let me go ahead and just create a variable called name, and let's call that name DK. Right? If we call that name DK and we ask for the type of that name, it will give us stir. If we went ahead and the type of DK will tell you it is a string. Now, this is what it shows you in Anaconda, or should I say Jupyter. But if I went ahead and looked at what it asks, it shows me in Visual Studio Code. Let's go back to number one. That's the end of the Python. I did import this. Let's look for type of DK and execute that. Let's clear this first. So if I execute this, it's going to print that, and at the end, oops, I forgot to print it. Good job. I need to print that, and I can probably just cancel this, import this. That way we don't have to look at it and go straight to what we need to look at. Clear this and execute that. You can see here it's actually showing you it's of the class stir, right? So it's a data type string. That's what we call it in plain English, but it's of a class string. If I had to do print type, and let's try 1, 2, 3, that's going to print the type is from the class integer. Does that make sense now? That's good. Excellent.
Yes.
Good. So let's jump back into our presentation. That's usually a very difficult concept to grasp, but once you understand that, everything else becomes plain. Once you can get around that part of understanding class and type and what the class is made up of, which we'll look at shortly, then you'll be able to understand everything else, because all along, that's what we've been using. We have been importing libraries. Those libraries are extensions of classes that have been built. Each time we write a program, or each time we call it functions, we're actually pulling it probably from an object, which in this case would be a method. So when we look at attributes actually represent, I'm not sure if I have this on the next slide. Let me see. Nope, I don't. Attributes actually represent variables. We talked about variables, right? But this time, those variables are not hanging in the air. The variables are attached or bound to an object. For instance, you have a variable color, but that color is bound to the object car. So we know that if we want to change that car, we change the color. Also, we talked about functions. But functions, again, are flying out in the air. They're not bound to anything. But methods are bound to your object. You can decide and say you have a method that says drive. That would be bound to the car again. When you say drive, that means the car, or maybe I should say accelerate. When you say accelerate, it means the car should move forward. If you say reverse, it means the car should move backward. If you say brake, the car should brake. So those are things that the car can do. The car can accelerate, it can brake, it can reverse. And those are all methods which you can use and attach it to your car object. Does that make sense? So in a nutshell, that's all we need to know about object-oriented programming. Once you understand these basics, now it's just left for us to be able to write it out, to type it, right? When we practice it, you'll be able to create those. The constructor, again, is the person that's going to take that blueprint, or whatever you call it, the contractor that'll take that blueprint and actually build your house, right? So another way we can look at it is for people that like cooking or baking, you would look at the cake pan or the cookie cutter as a class. Okay. Maybe you have a star shape, maybe you have a round shape, maybe you have a square shape. Those are all different shapes of a baking pan. But then you use that to be able to create your particular type of cake. If you put in banana mixture, you get banana cake. If you put in a carrot mixture, you get carrot cake. Those are all different types of cakes that you have. Okay. But then you can reuse that cookie cutter or reuse the particular cake pan. All right. Excellent. Now let's dive deeper into the principles of object-oriented programming.